It's time for another Cattle Call segment. This Cattle Call program is an original production of the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. It's in coordination with Wolf Auto, Small Town Strong. And we continue our conversation once again this week with Brad Kooima, Varalik at Sioux Center, Iowa. Brad, thanks for joining us here today. First of all, just a quick recap of last week's markets as you see how the cash cattle trade did develop. It felt a little bit stronger last week. What do you make of where we ended last week?
No doubt about it. It was a fun week again on cash. And thanks, first of all, for having me on here, Chad. I enjoy this. We finished up again another week. Both the South and the North picked up, I would say, 240, generally 240 to 242, mostly to some regional places, although there was a couple of majors also in play. And in spite of the fact that we've seen some kill cuts, there were several places took the day off on Friday, and there's going to be a few of that doing that again this week. We still see enough aggression out there where there's still leverage, and people maybe get sick of me saying that, but that is the whole difference in a market, whether you have leverage or if you don't. And because the North is this current, and because we don't have captive supply of cattle up here in this area to speak of, we continue to be able to be price makers. So that's been really fun. South got up to about 232, so they're still almost $8 or $10 behind us. But they may not be quite as current down there as we are either, Chad.
You mentioned kill schedules. Could you elaborate just on that, maybe just a little bit, and kind of help us understand what's going on? What is the situation right now?
You're right. I apologize. My wife tells me that I talk in this broker speak, and not everybody understands that lingo, right? But so most of them kill 40-hour weeks, right? 5 8-hour shifts. A lot of plants have an A and a B shift, for instance. For 2 shifts a day. What happened here in the last 2 to 3 weeks is packer margins went from bad to worse. And I think I jokingly said last week on your show that I'm not setting up a GoFundMe account for the packer, but you have to be realistic of, boxes have gone down $25 at the same time that the cash market's gone up 10 or 12. So they're trying to manage their losses or manage their margins, or trying to, back up some supply so that they can regain some leverage. So what happens is sometimes they just plain take a Friday off. So you're down to a 32-hour work week for those places. That sounds like, that's easy. Let's just do that. It's a little more complicated than that, Chad. You gotta factor in the fact that at a big 4 type commercial deal, most of those have a union contract, and most of those have some details that allow for a little bit of that, but not for a lot of it. They have to have so many guaranteed hours. So it's a difficult conundrum for them. Now, some of the other issues here of if you're a producer, if you're a commercial, you want to be known as a reliable supplier to your people, so if your customer, the Costco, the Hy-Vee, the whatever it is, and you go like, I don't have any ribeyes today, sorry. Well, they're going to find some place where they indeed do have ribeyes. So it's not as easy as it sounds, but this packer losing money is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. Plants have closed before because of this. I don't expect that today, but their margins have to be stressed.
Sure. What about some of the other news items that are going on this week? We're getting closer and closer to that August 1st tariff deadline. Is that something that's still kind of being talked about in beef circles these days? What's the latest on that?
Yep, I'm going to fall on the sword. I think when we first talked about this 2 weeks ago, I said, I don't think that we'll have to worry about that. I think that that Trump will backpedal on this tariff deadline like he has on every other one so far. But he's making us sweat this time to the August 1 deadline. That's a week off. And we have a 26% tariff on right now for Brazilian. We're talking about grinding meat from Brazil, specific item that we get a bunch of. Over a third of the total beef imports that we get in the U.S. come from Brazil. It's a big deal. Talking a 50% deal on top of that, that's a 76% tariff. Is that not going to slow down that grinding meat that comes in here? It'd have to. And what does that do then to the price of the grind and everything else? And so all of a sudden you get into, that's probably a scenario that's short-term friendly to the markets, right? You got less supply. And so that I think is part of the support mechanism here in the futures market here too. I gotta think that he's going to backpedal on this deal a little bit, but maybe not. We do have a trade arrangement with Japan, announced this morning. While largely not connected, Chad, to beef, as beef was exempt from the last tariff thing with them, and I believe it still is, still kind of a feel-good kind of a deal too. I think that maybe helped some of our markets today, although it certainly didn't help the hogs or the corn very much.
Well, we've got to that part of the program now where we're going to do some of our listener comments, Brad. We have a couple of good ones here today. We'll go ahead and throw that first one out there. This one has to do with, I think we can call this a timing of the market question, right? A listener said, I had an old guy tell me 40 years ago, you can never sell too late in an up market and you can never sell too early in the down market. I like the sentiment of this statement. The only thing is, you should probably, and maybe you could do this, Brad, you can tell me where is that top of the market so I know which side of 5% off of that I can sell at, right?
I appreciate your spin of humor on that, because I'd be glad to tell you. I'm not going to tell anybody else, because I like you. I'm teasing. If I've read this question about a dozen times, and I'm trying to get to what I think this person is asking about. So I guess now I'm the old guy, and I think if this isn't exactly the answer that he's looking for, of course timing's everything, and of course nobody knows, including Brad Kooima, where the high is. I mean, if I did, believe me, we wouldn't be doing shows like this. We wouldn't even have customers. We just open the door to go to the bank on Friday, right? Nobody knows. And the perception that anybody, certainly me included, knows is an absolute fallacy. But if I could get to, if I could bend around his language a little bit, I've said it this way. If you sell into a market, okay, as it's going higher, hedging is tough. You first have to wait for the market to rally far enough so that you have a hedgeable margin, right? So now you're in an uptrend. So now you're breaking the very first rule of trading. You're trading against the trend. So you got an uptrending market. We got to do it anyway, right? Okay, so if you incrementally sell into a market like that, at some point when the market rolls over, you're going to have some nice sales on, okay? So I always say that if you don't sell on the way up, it's extremely unlikely that you're going to sell on the way down, because the first time it breaks a little bit, you're going to go like, okay, well, now I'm going to wait for it to come back so that I can get some sales on, and it doesn't come back. And so, I really encourage people that whether you're talking about corn or cattle or cocoa, you've got some kind of discipline selling into the move, because if you wait for it to tip over, it's very unlikely that you'll catch most of the down move. So if that's the guy's heart of his question, that's be my attempt to answer it, other than to say that there's nobody that knows where the end of the market is. If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it,
Well, and I think it comes back to what we've talked about before, and the fact that you do have a plan, that you have studied where you're at, what you want to accomplish, and you have a plan, and those incremental sales on the way up serve you well over time, don't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, the old saying of plan the trade and trade the plan. And don't listen to the noise. Do what you can to eliminate emotional decisions. It's like you've read my playbook for Hedging 101 when I used to go to do a lot of seminars. I still do a few, but and I had a guy one time, a customer, that he'd call me at 9:00, and I was like the 9th broker he had talked to by 9:00. He was so confused. He barely knew what his own name was, and I, because, every day there's bullish news and every day there's bearish news. I want to talk bearish news, let's talk box beef. You want to talk bullish news, let's talk about the discount to the strong cash market. Every day there's that stuff. Then I used to say to him, I said, well, am I the tiebreaker? Or you got 4 guys bullish and 4 guys bearish? He was listening to too much noise. So I think, do a few things you trust. If you could find someone that keeps you accountable, maybe that's a business partner, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a brother-in-law, or it's not your banker. Sorry, bankers. Well, this is what your plan was, Brad, right? My son does it to me, with our grain market. I thought we were going to sell some at 470. Yeah, you're right. We'll sell some at 470. Yeah. So anyway, sorry, a little bit of a marketing 101 lesson, but that question lended to it.
Sure. All right. We do have another question we want to talk about. This one has to do with New World screwworm out of Mexico. And the essence of it here is, the question is, when does it cool off to a point where we'll have cattle coming north again? And at that point, this listener, I think, has a fear that all of a sudden we're going to flood the markets. Is that a concern when we do get our head around this pest and we get some normal trade again?
I was a freshman in college, and I thought maybe I'd want to be a veterinarian until I found out that I couldn't hack chemistry at all. And so the question's a bit over my head. I'm trying to be funny, but one thing you do learn in college is to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. So I've actually, when I saw this question, I did a little bit of asking around with a couple of veterinary friends of mine, and so I'll try to answer this as best I can, but I'm by no means an expert by any means. So, the one vet reminded me, says, he said, if you go in a confined building in the wintertime, you might find a fly even in the north, although our climate is so severe that I don't think that any of the veterinary talent around here is really worried that we're going to have any trouble with screw in the north. And I'm talking about where I live is Northwest Iowa, but probably where you are too, Chet. Specifically to the question, so the average freeze date in Delhart, Texas, if you're wondering, is the 15th of October. I was surprised it was that early. That's not very different than up around here. But is that enough to really be a killer for it? Probably not, because the ability to live in some buildings and stuff like that. To the question, to your viewers' point, though, I think after this last spooking of where that screw was found only 370 miles from the border, has really made them pump the brakes on this idea that we're going to reopen anytime soon. If I had to guess, I'd say it'd be deep in the winter. And then it would be that same scaled in opening, like they were going to project, where there's one delivery, there's 5 points, I believe, one every week. So I would say the worry of this big, puking of, hundreds of thousands of cattle is very unlikely. We got a report Friday, and I would bet that this will probably be the 8th month in a row of record low placements for Texas because of this issue. I mean, it's a big deal if you're in Texas. It's a big deal to the market in general. It's a good question. Yeah.
So you brought up placements, and maybe this is a good place to talk about our two reports that we have coming up at the end of the week. We get a monthly cattle on feed report, and we get the semi-annual cattle inventory report. Both of those, again, released on Friday. Just very quickly, do you have any thoughts, anything specifically you're going to be watching in those reports, Brad?
Right, very quickly. On feed, 99%. Placements at 98, being that Texas number is so low, I would get, if I had to take a guess, I'd say the placement number is beatable. If I had to bet you a beer on it, I'd say 96, but that's not the way we do things here. I mean, the cattle inventory report is my favorite report of the whole year. And you and I have been doing this together, you'd have heard me ranting and raving and bitching. And, it's like that line from Liar, Liar, right? I'm going to do all that and I'm going to take it anyway, because there's nothing I can do about it. Because it's a critical report. We didn't get it last year because they didn't have $50,000 in the USDA budget to do the semi-annual inventory report. So we're not going to have any comparison, which is really annoying. But don't worry. Well, by the time we get to doing this deal, we'll do some deep dive analytics, because this is where you find out about heifer retention, beef cows, and all that stuff. Unfortunately, I'm on vacation next week. And my sub's going to have to do a great job for helping you fill in with that. But I'm looking forward to both reports. I don't know that the on feed is a market mover, but it should be very interesting long-term on the inventory report.
Okay, very good. And then just as we wrap up here, what are your thoughts on the rest of cash trade for this week? We have delayed it a little bit more than last week, I think. What are we looking at for development of cash trade this week?
The longer it takes to develop, the better we usually are. I'm gonna go out there and say I think we'll be for sure steady, and I wouldn't be at all surprised that we don't get the north back to 244 to 245. So I think with the action in the futures is going to give a lot of results. The feedlot, I'm going to say a couple higher again this week.
All right, very good. Brad, contact information, folks. I'd love to talk to reach out and talk about some of these things, right?
Yep, kkvtrading.com. Better yet, call us 712-722-0023.
And as you're watching Cattle Call, you have a question come across to your mind, make sure you submit that in the comments below. And who knows, maybe Brad and I will talk about that here in a future Cattle Call program. Once again, thanks to Brad Kooima of Varlick at Sioux Center, Iowa. Thank you for joining us here today. And again, click that notifications button and make sure that you're aware when the next Cattle Call program comes out. Again, Cattle Call brought to you by the Nebraska Rural Radio Association in sponsorship by Wolf Auto. Small town strong. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week on Cattle Call. Chad Moyer reporting.